Hi, this is Jassel with Geek Public Radio, bringing you your criminal fix. I would like to warn you in advance that this episode will contain talk that includes assault, sexual assault, rape, and pedophilia, while we discuss Dean Corll and the Houston mass murders, also known as the Candyman. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like it and subscribe to our channel for all of our content.
Robbery has turned into a potentially explosive situation.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining us. This is Jassel with Geek Public Radio and bringing you your criminal fix. Tonight we are going to talk about the Candyman, Dean Corll, also known as the Houston mass murders.
I'm actually really excited about this episode.
I know.
Mostly because his name is Corll, but that's just me.
Yes, his name is Dean Arnold Corll. He was born actually on Christmas. He was a Christmas Eve baby in 1939, and he died in 1973, August 1973, by gunshot. But he was active as a serial killer between 1970 and 1973.
So in 3 year span?
Yes.
3 year time?
It was almost exactly a 3-year time span. I thought for a second I had to look, and I was like, no, it's a 2.5. No, actually, it was like literally 3 years.
That's pretty awesome. Oh, I'm Crazy Chris, everybody. Sorry.
Yes, thank you for joining me, Crazy Chris.
That voice you hear on the
side. So the reason why he was given the nickname of the Candyman is because he actually grew up and his family owned a candy business. And, making candy, they first started out in like their garage and whatnot. And they eventually got to the point where they had their own facility that was located directly across from a school. And so he would go out and he would give free candy to the kids. He would invite them to come and hang out in the back of the warehouse and the manufacturing place, and the pool table, but it was always boys that he would hang out with.
So, fun fact of the day, that Dean Corll is actually a portion of a subject in Black Book, the film that's coming out from Melody Productions too, which is where I told you, I was like, you should do this.
I got to see a little bit of a clip of it. Yeah,
it is such an interesting dynamic and dichotomy with how he fits into the urban legend of the Candyman versus the actual truth of it. I thought that was pretty neat. So if you guys want to check that out, Black Book, Amazon.
Definitely check it out. I got to see a clip of it. I haven't gotten to see the whole thing yet, but yeah, definitely check it out, because what I did see was pretty impressive, and I'm actually quite excited to see the rest of it. But Dean Corll is not to be confused with the 1974 poisoning of candy, which has kind of gotten huge because, this is why we're all concerned about candy at Halloween for our kids, because, that guy poisoned candy of his kid to try and cash in on his life insurance policy. So this is not him. This is by far worse.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Just a little bit. I mean, as you got with the content warning. But he's also called the Pied Piper because he would kind of lure them in and
how did he
deceive them and, kind of get them to fall for his tricks pretty much. But he did grow up a rather quiet kid, kind of a loner. He was drafted into the military in 1964, but he petitioned to be let out because his family's business was pretty much he said it was like incapable of running without him. After 10 months of service, they granted that and he was out. But during that time that he was in the service, he disclosed to several close acquaintances that he discovered that he was a homosexual. He had his first homosexual encounter while he was in the military, and he kind of realized that, although he had a couple girlfriends growing up, he just kind of realized that that's not what was him. He just preferred men. But they also started noticing, some other acquaintances noticed that he would be kind of strange around teenage boys, which is not okay. So,
A real creeper type.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, giving out free candy now looks creepy, and he's partly why. Because, you lure them in, and kids love candy. I mean, adults do too.
And then,
but
of course,
kids love
there is
candy.
the widely adopted stance by most parents in which you don't allow your children to don't take candy from strangers.
Yes.
For once, that actually makes sense. Don't.
He is why you can't take candy from strangers. This is why we can't have nice things.
That's exactly right. So there's a reason for that, kiddos. Hopefully you guys aren't watching this and your parents are more responsible than that. But here we are. Go ahead.
Well, while he was working for the company, he was said to be more flirtatious with some of the younger male employees. One even made a complaint to his mom, because his mom was the owner of the business, and she responded by firing the kid. So, yeah, not a good response. Nowadays, that would not fly, but unfortunately, back then it did.
Yeah, that's... Yeah, I
Yeah.
Like, I get that Norma... What is it? The Norma Bates, right? Was Norma... Was that her name? I think I don't know. I'm pretty sure it was Norma Bates, the psycho. Well, Norman Bates was the psycho. Was the not American Psycho? The actual movie Psycho was Norman Bates. But I'm pretty sure his mother, which is the reason he was so messed up, it was Norma Bates. Yeah.
Well,
Confirmation. It is Norma Bates. Okay, cool. Producer's like, yeah, it's her. He's nodding his head in the background.
So the company did eventually fail. And so, of course, it closed down. That was in 1968. After that, he actually started working as an electrician. And he continued that work as an electrician up until he died. Now, he did not work alone. He did have two accomplices. His first accomplice that we'll talk about is David Owen Brooks. Corll met and befriended Brooks when he was only 12. So he's like grooming him.
That's gross.
Yeah.
Number one. And David Owens Brooks is also, initials are DOB, so it's for date of birth.
Interesting.
It's a prison thing. Anyways, go ahead.
Really? Oh.
No, it's DOB is actually for everything, but it's like they were in prison.
So Brooks, though, as a 12-year-old and for a couple years after that, kind of saw Corll as a father figure. He didn't really have a good father figure in his life. His parents were split up, and his dad wasn't really around. That must be a more recent picture, because that definitely wasn't when he was 12.
Yeah. No, that's the oldest 12. That's the Benjamin Button 12-year-old right there. Go ahead.
But whenever he needed money, whenever he needed help, Corll would always be there for him. Now, after some urging on Corll's part, they did eventually engage in a sexual relationship. And mind you, at the time that Corll started killing people, Brooks was only 14. So he's still very much so a minor. And like I said, grooming, only he didn't wait till he was an adult.
That's Jesus.
Yeah. And that was around 1969. So he was like 13, 14. When that started.
That's, yeah. Not a lot you can really say about things like that. It's grotesque, it's grisly. It's why we put the TW at the very beginning.
Yes.
It is what it is.
Now, Corll would actually pay him, so to speak, for doing these sexual favors. He would give him cash. He would give him gifts when he didn't ask for help. Now, before it was he asked for help, he got the help. But then it became, okay, well, you're satisfying my
urges.
Needs. And
urges.
Urges. Thank you. It's a much better word than. But so here, let me spoil you, pretty much.
Right.
So around the time that Brooks was 14, Brooks interrupted Corll assaulting two teenage boys. He took payment to keep quiet in the form of Corll bought him a car. So, I mean, I'm not sure why he did it. I assume at this point, though, that
I mean, he's been there since he was 12. His hooks were in.
He'd been manipulated to the point where that was an easy payoff, is to just get him a car. Okay, well, you're a kid, and kids want cars. Here's a car. So he took that payment to keep quiet, and then he started offering Corll $200 per boy that Brooks would bring to Corll's residence.
That's wow. Okay, so to make sure that I'm hashing this out correctly, Corll grooming Brooks from the time he was 12 years old.
Yes.
Brooks, around 15 or 16, walked in on him assaulting.
13, 14. Well, about 14.
14 years old, walked in on him assaulting 2 younger boys. Mm-hmm. And took a car as a payoff.
To keep quiet.
And then later took payment from Corll
to keep bringing him boys.
To keep bringing him boys, knowing that he was doing these things. Now,
sorry.
This is like a classic case study in psychological abuse. Like,
oh yes,
holy crap! Like what he did was atrocious and terrible. The
yes.
Corll, right? And
absolutely.
Brooks, like you almost feel bad. You almost feel bad for him because
he was a kid. He was highly impressionable. He was easy to, and he was from the broken home, thing. And back then it was a much bigger thing than it is now.
Which
for a
kind
kid
of
to be from a broken
nurture
home.
Versus nature.
Yeah.
Like that's.
And he started out with, well, here, let me take care of you. Let me help you. And so,
yep.
He's vulnerable.
Yep. And
he's a kid. He's vulnerable. And that's
crazy.
why, I'm maybe part of the reason why he took the payment and why he brought Corll boys is because at one point he did actually be a victim of Corll's, whereas Corll tied him up, assaulted him, and repeatedly before allowing him to be released. He was not a murder victim, but Brooks even continued after that assault. So it's believed that Brooks wronged him in some way, like he did something wrong. We don't know what, but it's
brought
assumed.
him. It's probably something really stupid, like
probably
brought him a blonde instead of a brunette for that day. Like it was probably something incredibly stupid.
16-year-old instead of a 14-year-old,
right?
It was probably something incredibly stupid. But even after that assault, Brooks continued to, we'll say, work for him.
Okay.
And $200, mind you, back in 1970 was the equivalent of like $1,200 to $1,300 today.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of money. And so, I mean,
after 5 weeks, he could have bought himself a used car, like a newer used car.
Yeah.
In the 70s.
So that's Brooks. Now the other acquaintance was a little more involved.
Crazy stuff that the Candyman has done.
No.
This is just what the accomplices, have provided.
Yes.
Okay. This is
so
this
our
is
second accomplice,
dark.
which is just the two. So we don't have a bunch of accomplices to go through. We just have the two.
It's just not like last week where
there were like 15 of them.
The entire town was in on it.
Exactly. So the other one was Elmer Wayne Henley, which was roughly the same age as Brooks.
I don't have anything clever for his initials.
He was a friend of Brooks, and Henley became involved in the winter of 1971, which was at the age of 14. It is believed that he was actually supposed to be a victim, and for some reason, I don't know what happened, but for some reason, he ended up being offered the $200 per boy. Each young boy that you bring me, it's $200, same as Brooks. And so he took it. Now, he at first thought that the boys that he would be bringing him were for a white slavery ring running out of Dallas, for pretty much human trafficking. It was sexual human trafficking. And he was fine with it. His family got into these horrible financial situation, and he wanted to help, and this was an easy way for him to help. And he didn't realize yet what actually was fully happening. So he, just like Brooks did, brought him a boy, gave him $200, went on his way. Now he did help with tricking the victims into putting on handcuffs, what they would do is they had real handcuffs, but they would have the key tucked in their back. So they would put the handcuffs on themselves, unlock them, and take them back off and be like, here, it's fun, you do it too, thinking that they're play handcuffs, when then these kids would put these handcuffs on and then they'd be stuck in them.
Jesus Christ.
So they'd be tricked into
cuffing themselves.
being restrained. Yeah, they'd be tricked into being restrained. So
Jesus.
yeah, sorry.
Like when you fathom it, you put that into perspective. That is devilishly devious. That is horrific, and that's all by itself. Mm-hmm. What's the easiest way to get somebody to do something? You just ask them.
Especially when you can manipulate them.
Yep. You just ask them to do it.
Now, that was just during
crazy.
his first abduction. He left with the kid restrained, thinking that this kid was going to be sent off to wherever to be trafficked. And it was during the second abduction that he learned what Corll was really doing. So it didn't take long for him to figure out what was really happening. But he still remained an active participant after finding that out. So he knew that these kids were being
abused,
and assaulted, raped, and all kinds of horrible things. But Brooks actually claimed that Henley was, in quotes, especially sadistic in his continued participation, because Henley actually took part in several of the murders. In his confession to the police, he said anywhere from 6 to 8. He didn't really have a set number, which, I don't know. I feel like if you've
murdered somebody, you
murdered
remember
people, you'd remember how many you actually murdered.
Well, it just kind of depends, I guess, on your headspace.
Yeah. In his written confession, though, he said that he partook in approximately 9. So he gave a set number in his written confession of 9, of not just abductions, but those were the ones that he actually partook in. The torture, he partook in the actual killing.
So he participated in all of these, and the 9 was an active participation in their death.
In their actual death, yes.
As opposed to just the kidnapping.
Yes.
So.
Now, they both did confess, and they both were given life sentences. Understandably so.
I mean, the only one that it's the Brooks. Brooks is the only one I'm like, man, like he was 12 years old. Like he didn't even, that's sad.
So, they in all had at least 28 young male victims ranging from ages 13 to 20. So he some of them got all the way up to 20, but some of them were as low as 13, but the majority of them were like mid-teens. So right in that, you're figuring yourself out and you're getting ready to have your independence, and then it's just your whole life's taken from you.
So, and I guess what's the exceptionally bizarre part, did Brooks bring Henley to Corll?
Brooks brought Henley to Corll, and it was originally supposed to be a victim, if that's what's believed.
Okay, and then it ended up becoming a grossness.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm assuming
I don't know what happened between...
I'm assuming Henley probably said something like,
this is fun.
I like to do this too.
Yeah, and so
something like that.
Yeah, so he maybe... Corll was like, "Oh, you're a prodigy. Let's get you started early."
There's a scene in Dexter. I don't know if anybody has ever watched that show.
It's on my list.
But there's a scene in Dexter in which he captures one of the serial killers, mm-hmm. and there's a bonding moment as she basically confesses to being the female version of him, and they have this whole dialogue thing, and then he ends up letting her go, and they have romance and all that. So I'm just, in my brain,
really
I'm
weird
seeing
romance.
him. I mean, bad romance. Thanks, Lady Gaga. But in my head, I'm picturing that might be how that dialogue between Henley and this. He's like, "Oh,
very
you're a
well could've.
sadistic, twisted piece of crap too. Awesome, me too. Let's hang out together.
Let's feed our sadistic awfulness.
Right. Let's go to the arcade
with each other. Yeah, it's
play canasta.
Well, for the most part, Brooks and Henley would get most of their victims from lower income areas. Where
it's less likely that the crimes would be investigated. Sorry, it is what it is.
Yeah, unfortunately. Especially, back in the 70s.
Yep.
So,
especially, yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of them were lower income neighborhoods, but they would offer either, hey, you want to come party with us? Or, hey, do you need a lift? And that's how they would trap their victims. Is they would be like, hey, come party with us, or hey, do you need a lift? And either way, if they got somebody in the car, no matter what, they went to wherever Corll was living at the time. He moved several times. But wherever Corll was living at the time, they would go there. And then once there, they would be given alcohol, random other drugs. There was paint sniffing, party stuff.
Right.
And then, like I said, they'd be tricked into putting the handcuffs on. And if they didn't and Corll wanted his victim, they would be taken by force. So if they didn't drink, if they didn't get drunk enough to pass out where they could restrain them themselves or trick them into restraining them, then they would just be restrained by force.
Right.
So at this point, most of them would pass out from like alcohol and drug consumption.
Right, they're teenagers.
They're going to be impacted by probably a smaller amount. But they would then be stripped naked and taken back to the bedroom where they would either be restrained to the bed or Corll had torture boards where he would tie them up to these boards where he would...
Now, this is all in his house?
This is all happening wherever he lived.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, like I said, he moved several times. So,
I mean, it... Yeah.
I mean, I don't... See, a lot of times he was in an apartment.
Is that one of the... so that's one of the boards right there.
Yeah, right there. That's one of the torture boards that they found.
Jesus Christ.
With all the wiring. I think they're holding the radio and stuff that they found, but yeah, that's one of the torture boards. If you look closely at the picture, you can see ropes hanging off of it from where they would be tied.
That's insane.
But once they were tied up to either the board or the bed, they would be sexually assaulted, beaten, tortured. Sometimes this would go on for several days. And if he had them for several days, there were times that he would have them either write to their parents or call their parents to let them know, hey, I'm spending the night at a friend's house, so that their parents wouldn't wonder where they were.
Wow.
Yeah. So he would...
This is a particularly sadistic piece of garbage.
Absolutely.
Human filth. Like...
So
this is, if you want to know how low the society, like how low dregs can be, how bad it can get, if you really want to know what it's like when crime is allowed to just be what it is, here you go. Take a good hard look.
Well, once he was done torturing, however long he decided to take with the torture and the assault and all of that, he would either strangle them or he had a .22 pistol that he would shoot them with to kill them. So that's...
Now, did he live in like an isolated area?
No. A couple of his places were apartments.
Huh.
Like,
okay.
and that's what I don't get. It's like, I don't know about the apartments in the 1970s in Houston, but apartments now, if this was happening in an apartment, I feel like the neighbors would know.
Yeah.
I feel like they'd hear something. Now,
in defense of those people, in the 70s, people minded their own business. So, for all they knew...
it was also... Serial killers weren't a rampant thing.
Yeah.
So
nowadays, we hear stuff like that. If we heard it like twice in a row, we'd be like,
okay,
right, I'm going to go ahead and call the cops, man.
Yeah.
This is weird.
So in early of 1973, Corll suffered a hydrocele, which was believed to be why he went inactive between February and June of 73. So between February and June of 1973, He didn't kill anybody. He didn't assault anybody. I tried to look up what hydrocells are, and I didn't fully grasp it because at first they started talking about one thing, and then they started talking about how it had to do with fluid buildup around the testicles or something. So it became quite painful for men. Apparently, this obviously was the thing for men.
I haven't. Apparently, by Google definition, is I'll just read it.
Okay, go for
is
it.
a type of swelling in the scrotum that occurs when fluid collects in the thin sheath surrounding a testicle. Hydrocele is common in newborns and usually disappears without treatment by age 1. Older boys and adult men can develop a hydrocele due to inflammation or injury within the scrotum. So hopefully, one of his victims got a good swat on his testicle.
Yeah, and caused him to go out of commission for a few months.
Which probably saved a lot. I mean,
well, you could say that it did, but when he got back into it, his killings increased dramatically, and the level of brutality involved increased. And it was Henley described it as if he had a bloodlust. So it was like maybe he was furious that he had to miss out on time. I don't know. So he felt like he was angry about that, and he took it out on his victims. But during 1973, Brooks knocked up his fiancée, which he then married. And during that time, Brooks took a break from helping and being involved in anything.
Without consequence?
Without consequence.
Huh. Okay.
Without any consequence that I'm aware of. I mean, I couldn't find any consequences.
That's fair.
But during that time, he was not helping Corll or Henry. But maybe Corll was satisfied with the fact that he had Henley to help him, because Henley was the more brutal one. I mean, he was the more willing participant, and he didn't just participate in the abductions. He was just like, yeah, let's have fun and do all of this,
right?
Together.
He was the real partner in crime.
Yeah. And so Brooks started out, being the partner in crime. And then I think Henley, because he was more into it, sadistic, I guess you could say, yeah. And
more twisted, more warped.
Yeah.
There's a lot of words you could use to describe that person. He kind of became
the second.
Right.
Because whereas Brooks would bring people, Henley would participate. Now, in 1973, after the break in the killings, he abducted and killed 9 young men between the June and August.
God
yeah.
dang.
Actually, I think one of those was in January, and the rest of them were between June and August.
I had to let that settle for a second. That's...
Yeah. Like when I said he came back with a vengeance and brutality, he came back with a vengeance and brutality.
I mean, whoever that injury threw off his plan. I mean, that's what it was.
Yeah.
He had a goal. He probably had a most serial killers have a schedule. They're very regimented. They do things in a particular way, in a particular order.
Some of them have to go the way that the psychology works with them is they can only go so long before they have to take another victim.
Yeah, so that's...
Because that addiction is there, that itch is there. So, but in the previous years, in 1970, between September and December, he had 3 victims. In 1971, he abducted and killed 6. And then in 1972, he abducted and killed 10. So in the span of 3 to 4 months, he practically did his 1972.
Right.
Instead of, taking the whole year to do it, he compiled it. So several of these victims were left unidentified until forensics improved and they were able to identify them. There is actually only one victim that remains unidentified. I'm not sure why they can't identify him, but they have used forensics to further look into what he had done and to identify the ones that were not identified. Because 42 or 43 boys vanished in that area during the time that he was active. At least 28 of those we know for sure were Corll and Henley and Brooks. there's believed to be more. But
these are the ones that they could prove.
28 that they could prove, 27 that they could identify. Some of those were with the help of Brooks and Henley, showing them where the bodies were, because 17 of them were buried in a rented boathouse. So it was pretty, or boat shed. It was pretty much a mass grave. I mean, it wasn't like war level mass grave, but it was definitely a mass grave. Yeah, we got a picture there showing them going through that boathouse. I mean, that's not a big boathouse.
No. I mean, look at their faces. Like,
I mean, well, they know what they're finding. They knew when they were going there what they were going to find.
Look at the media. See, look how close they are. Look at that. Look at that. That is insane. Right there in the top right-hand corner. He's just... There's a dude with a camera just recording the whole thing. Or is that... No, that's not media. I think that's a cop. Is that a shield?
Yeah, it looks
like
so
it's an evidentiary recorder. Okay, never mind.
Yeah.
I thought it was media. I was like, good God, really?
But yeah, I mean, look at the...
Vultures.
That one guy's face. I mean, he looks like he's just... I can't believe I'm doing this.
He doesn't want to. You could just tell he does not want to be standing there. Yeah.
I mean, who wants to be the one that has to discover all of that and come to the realization that that's what happened in their community?
Yeah, that's... Oh, God. All right.
So 4 more were buried in the woods by Lake Sam Rayburn. At least 1 at a beach in Jefferson County, and at least 6 on a beach on the Bolivar Peninsula. Forgive me if I'm saying that wrong.
Could you imagine being the kid that digs the sandcastle on that beach?
Oh my God. That kid would need therapy. I would need therapy, and I'm an adult.
And then the cycle repeats itself. Like, I mean, just...
Yeah.
That's
that's a pretty... I mean...
But
coming across the body is pretty traumatizing.
As far as serial killers are concerned, it actually does seem to be a pretty common theme that it's... they're usually buried. Their victims are usually buried in isolated areas. There's some exceptions to that rule, obviously, but their victims seem to be in isolated areas, usually on a property that they themselves or a conspirator or somebody else owns that is never utilized for any function or purpose. It's just something that no one has any cause to look at.
And it's a good way to not be seen when you're doing your dirty work.
Yep. That's all right.
Now, the last attack was Corll's last attack. On the evening of August 7th of 1973, Henley, who is now 17, brought a friend who was 19. His name was Timothy Cordell Curley. He brought him over to hang out at Corll's house. This was literally just a friend, not someone that was going to be coming over to be getting abducted, not somebody that was going to be a victim. It was supposed to just be a friend coming over to hang out, because that was something that happened there. I mean, if everybody just didn't leave that house, that got into that house, it'd be suspicious, right? So they had other people over there, and they would actually party and whatnot. So, I mean, at a minimum,
people heard that there was a party there, they'd be like, "Oh, that's
like,
not weird."
They're just partying again,
right?
Yeah. So, now when they
again, how do you get people to do something?
Apparently, Corll had plans from the get-go that he was going to actually take Curley as a victim. Now, but Henley was not aware of this. So Henley did not willingly bring his friend over to sacrifice, pretty much. I mean, because that's pretty much what he's doing. He was giving sacrifices.
I mean, that's if you want to go the darkest route possible, he's literally bringing victims to the devil.
Yeah.
Anyways, go ahead.
Around midnight, they went to go get food. It said they went to get sandwiches. Now, I have no idea in 1973 where you could get sandwiches at midnight, but apparently there was somewhere in Houston you could do that. But when they came back, they parked a little bit down the street from Corll's house. And by doing this, they were actually across the street from another friend of Henley's, who was a teenage girl, Rhonda Louise Williams. And they heard some commotion. So they went to go check it out, and they found her beaten by her drunk father. So they were like, "Come on, you're coming with us. Come out hanging with us. You know, you can party with us. No big deal.
Get out of the house."
Yeah, get you out of the house. And this was around 3 a.m. that he came back. And when he came back, Corll was furious. Absolutely furious with Henley. They apparently had a sidebar conversation, excuse me, for about 30 minutes. And during that time, he was just like, you ruined everything. You brought a damn girl over here. That's not supposed to happen. This just ruins all of it. And so they kind of, back and forth, and eventually Corll and Henley hashed it out, and still Henley is not aware anyone's going to become a victim.
Right.
So, Williams and Corll had no knowledge of that private discussion. And so once that discussion was done, the three of them started drinking, smoking marijuana, sniffing paint fumes. It's all the same stuff that they would do,
right.
With anyone else. And well, this whole time, Corll was apparently just sitting there intently watching them, probably stewing, because he's pissed. There's a woman at his house, and
see, I don't know. There's obviously a brutality evident in his murder and his assault and everything else that this man did, this monster did. When he's just from what I said, even the altercation between him and Henley, it actually sounds more as though he was upset because he broke the order of things. He disrupted.
Yes.
It sounds very much, and I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychologist by any stretch of the imagination. I don't get paid nearly enough for that nonsense. And by nonsense, I mean the things that they have to deal with. But I'm hedging. I need to stop that. It sounds like Corll had OCD really, really bad.
Well, I mean, maybe with his developed, serial killer lifestyle,
yep.
In order to make sure everything was just right and just so that he could keep things going, maybe he became OCD.
And so I don't know if necessarily when he was watching them intently, he was probably performing a series of how he was going to do things.
How am I going to respond to
this? How
this?
am I going to do this? I want to do this. I need to do this. How am I going to do it?
Yeah, exactly. So after about 2 hours of them partying, the three had passed out, which,
it's
obviously was a bad idea. Well, typical and a bad idea. Henley awoke to find that he had been restrained. He had handcuffs on, tape over his mouth, ankles bound. He saw that his two friends were also restrained and gagged, and that Corll had stripped Corll. Not Williams, just Corll.
Right.
Now, Corll noticed that Henley was coming to, and took the tape off, and was, pleading with him, and, being like, hey, don't do this. Please don't hurt my friends, and meanwhile, Corll's doing his thing. He's just like, man, you really blew it by bringing a girl here.
Think about that for just a second. Henley, who has literally participated in murder, who has shown himself completely devoid of conscience and devoid of remorse, is now pleading with the man he knows is akin to the devil himself, asking him to not do the exact things that he knows he does.
Well, I mean, fight or flight. He was fighting.
I don't.
In any way he could. He was bound, so he couldn't really fight any other way.
I feel like, I don't know.
I mean, he knew.
It's this weird.
He knew based on the pattern that the way that they were bound and tied up, Corll was stripped.
He knew
what was coming.
Yeah.
Yeah. So of course he's going to be like, please don't do this. Please don't hurt my friends. You don't need to do this, man.
My shock is more from, why the hell did he care?
Well, now he has brought acquaintances as people that got abducted and killed. He has brought acquaintances over, but I think that Corll, and of course, and I'm certain because Williams was a female, he was more protective of her, and he was trying to protect her from her dad that night and to begin with, and so I think that because he was closer to these two, he didn't want to see it happen. He didn't want that inevitable fate to come to them. And since they were still passed out at this time, there was still an opportunity to unrestrain them and, I don't know, tell Curly, he willingly took off his clothes for some reason. Like, I don't know, man, you just started stripping for some reason. Like, you could make up a lie as to why he was stripped.
Oh, so Henley was the one that was... Okay, so the other two were still passed out. Henley came to first.
Henley
How old
came
was
to
Henley
first.
at this time, did it say?
17, I believe. I believe he was
Okay.
17. Williams, I believe, was 15, and then Curly was
19.
19, yeah.
Okay.
So they were two-year increments between
Okay.
them.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're fine.
I'm trying to ask some clarifying questions, and it's shocking to me that somebody who literally murdered people for funsies all of a sudden is like, no, don't hurt my friends. Like, you
Well-
don't have friends. It's a weird concept. I mean, the serial killers have friends all the time, and I get
Yeah.
that, but
But they don't usually hurt
they
their
don't.
friends,
Well, they
and
don't
that's
usually.
probably why.
They don't usually care. It's the caring that's weird to me. It's almost it just doesn't make sense.
He probably didn't carry, a sociopath issue,
Maybe he cared. I feel like he probably cared more that he was likely he'd get caught.
or that he would himself die because he was restrained.
Yeah.
So, Corll went on, of course, they quoted him saying, "Man, you really blew it by bringing that girl. I'm going to kill you all, but first I'm going to have my fun." So those were quotes that they gave the police. So Corll kicked Henley several times before bringing him to his feet, taking the .22 pistol, putting it up against his stomach, kept threatening him, I'm going to kill you, how he messed everything up, so on and so forth, how he's going to kill his friends. And so Henley, after apparently it was about 30 minutes, another 30-minute discussion, convinced Corll to release him because he would participate. Be like, okay, cool, no, I get what you're saying, I'll help you.
Yep.
I'll help make sure that you get these, because if I'm gone, who's going to help you bury the bodies?
Right.
Because Brooks is absent. Brooks is not here during this. And so my assumption would be that that's what he said to him, was something along the lines of, spare me. Obviously, I won't tell anybody. I'll help you. I'll facilitate this with you and help cover it up like I do have
So many times.
so many times before. Yeah. So he was just like, okay, cool. You can participate. But you're going to do what I say.
Right.
Pretty much. So he uncuffs him. At this point, the two of them carry Curly and Williams back to the bedroom, where Corll ordered Henry to cut off Williams's clothes, and instructed her that he was going to, he said, strip off her clothes and you're going to rape her.
Right.
So they are bound to the torture boards. And while, he's doing this, she is coming to, and so is Curly. And, she's like, is this for real? Is this really happening? And he's like, yes. And apparently she said, well, what are you going to do about it? To him. So maybe he was actually going to participate, and her saying that made him realize,
Jostled, whatever,
kind of
right.
jostled it up. And so, he starts cutting off her clothes. He's getting her undressed, and she says those, few things to him kind of quietly. And Henley said that he wanted to take Williams to another room. And Corll apparently ignored him. I don't know, he was busy getting ready to do
Right.
his thing. And so, for whatever reason, he ignored him. Maybe he didn't hear him. I don't
Right.
know. But at this point, it's like Henley realized he's not paying attention.
Right. Yeah, I was
And
going to
I've
say
been-
that it's at that moment that
Yeah. And I've been trained to react quickly to these weird situations that I've been part of for the last, 2 to 3 years. So he picks up the gun and he points it at Corll, and Corll taunts him. He laughs at him. Like, you're not going to do it. You're not going to kill me, man. You won't do it.
Right.
And, go ahead. Go ahead. You won't do it. Go ahead and kill me. Taunting him pretty much. And so eventually, Henley proceeded to fire at Corll, hitting him in the head, square in the head, but it didn't penetrate his skull.
Nope.
So, of course, Corll starts coming after him. And so he proceeds to shoot 2 more times, hitting him in the left shoulder. I'm assuming he was aiming for the heart area.
The chest, right.
Yeah. And just hit the shoulder.
Or the head, and Corll was moving.
Or he was just shooting and
right,
and
or he was just
hit.
panic firing, whatever.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it could have been panic fire, it could have been aimed. I mean, we don't really know. But at this point, he's shot twice, well, 3 times. Just one didn't go in. And Corll starts to leave the room. And as he's trying to leave the room, Henley continues to fire 3 additional shots. One that hit his lower back and the back of his left shoulder. And at that point was when Corll fell to the ground, facing the wall, naked, because he was about to do his evil deeds. And that is how the police found him. Now, because he died fairly quickly after falling to the ground, and after he died, Henley went and undid all the restraints and, let his friends put their clothes back on and all that good stuff. And then the 3 of them sat there and talked about it, like, what are we going to do? Like, those 2 were probably like, what the heck just happened? And now, but all of them are sitting there trying to figure out, well, what do we do? So they decided to call the police and confess. And they took Henley's killing of Corll, and they agreed it was in self-defense. And I mean, it was.
It is.
Yeah.
I mean, by definition.
The first shot, he wasn't actively being attacked, but the next ones he was, and he knew he was under threat. So, I mean, that's self-defense.
It is. It's self-defense, defense of another, but it's still a defensible situation.
Yes. So, fortunately for Williams and Henley, and Henley, I guess, too, and Curley, but neither one of them got assaulted or beaten or tortured that night. They were passed out. They were bound up. They were tied to boards. They had their clothes stripped of them. But they didn't have any of the heinous acts that happened to the others happen to them.
Right.
So fortunately, they get to, leave with that. Now, after he did this, he confessed that he thought Corll would be proud of him. Yeah. He thought Corll would be proud of him because of the way that he handled it, the way that he behaved during the confrontation, how he reacted so quickly, and how he for some reason, he thought Corll would be proud of him for how he handled it. So it's almost like Corll still had his claws in him, even though he was dead. Even though he came to the realization of how awful Corll is, and that he needed to be stopped, especially right now because he didn't want his friends to die.
Like how awful he was.
Yeah,
like that's the whole thing. Like don't lose track of any of that. It's like he was still a horrifically terrible person.
Yes, and maybe her saying what she did to him made him realize, like, hey, wow, my God, I am a horrible person. Like,
'twas beauty that slayed the beast. I mean, that's kind of it's gross. I mean, it's so gnarly because it's basically 2 killers were pitted against each other. 2 terribly horrific people were pitted against one another.
Yes.
Not unlike American politics, in which you have to choose a winner.
Yeah. Well, in this case, Henley won. So of course, on the morning of August 8th, 1973, Corll died by gunshot at the hand of Henley. So
his accomplice killed him.
Yes.
Okay.
Now,
good for Henley.
Now, when they went into the police station, of course, they were asked questions and their stories, and all of their stories, I mean, obviously, they weren't scripted, so they weren't, exactly the same, but they definitely met with each other. Mm-hmm. Like, you could definitely tell, no, they're telling the truth. So, now, Henley also, during this time, decided he was going to divulge all kinds of details. And over the span of a couple days, he confessed to everything that he had done. And he told them everything that Corll had done. Now, Brooks' involvement at this time, he ended up turning himself in to the police station. He had his dad help him, escort him to the police department to be turned in. And he denied any involvement with any of the murders, but he did admit that he was aware that they were happening.
Right.
So he He said he was aware that Corll had raped and killed 2 youths in 1970. Now, he later confessed that he was present at several of the murders and assisted in several burials. But he still maintains his innocence, that he didn't kill anybody, he didn't assault anybody, he didn't beat anybody in any way. And so he maintains that innocence, but he did admit to bringing him victims. He did admit to helping bury those victims and whatnot. So Brooks ended up getting 99 years for a life sentence, because that was life sentence in 1970. Well, 4 was actually when he was given his sentence, but because he did go to trial. And so Brooks got a 99-year sentence, but he died last year after serving only 45 years of that sentence because he caught the COVID. And so May 28th of 2020, so not too far into that, he managed to catch it and therefore die from it. He had a bunch of several other illnesses apparently, and at this point he was the age of 65.
So he'd been in prison. What was that? How long he'd been in prison for?
45 years.
45 years. Okay.
Give or take some months.
Man.
Yeah. So Henley also obviously found guilty because he admitted to everything. He pleaded guilty. He was given 594-year sentence. So 6 life sentences to be served consecutively.
To be served consecutively.
Yes, thank you. Served consecutively. So he wasn't getting out. He's not getting out. He's actually still alive, serving his sentence. So, and of course, Corll is dead.
Right.
Now,
and Henley would be probably in his 60s by now. Then.
Yes, he was about the same age as Brooks, so he's probably about 65. Or no, yeah, 65, 66, because that was last year. So
yeah.
Now, of course, with every serial killer, we have to have a keepsake. Every serial killer has to have their keepsake.
Right, their memento.
I don't know. I don't get that. I don't get the psychology behind that. I also haven't dived too deep into it. But
it's a conquest.
For Corll, it was keys. I don't know. I feel like that's kind of weird. You'd think that they would take something else and lock of hair or
It's
something.
usually always something innocuous. Very rarely is it like what you see in the movies where they like cut out their eyeball or something stupid crazy like that, or take their teeth, or it's usually something insanely stupid. Now there are 2 serial killers that I know of that collected teeth. That is 100% what they did. But like the Zodiac never took mementos
that we know of.
that we're aware of, because technically he never got caught. But it is widely assumed he was male.
Well, I don't know. According to American Horror Story, it was a group of females.
Which could very possibly have been the truth too.
Yeah. Maybe they know something we don't. But yeah, it was keys. Keys were his mementos that he kept.
All right.
Now, Henley and Brooks did assist with locating all of the bodies that they knew about. And they also helped with identifying some of them, letting them know when certain ones died so that they could kind of determine, okay, well, we know that this one died at this time frame. We know this one died at this time frame, and this one's kind of decomposed in the middle. So we know that they were killed at some point here. Now, who went missing between here? And that would help identify.
Right.
Some
They
of the
were able to
victims.
correlate time of death decomposition with our time of death decomp, time of absence, things
Yeah.
like that. They were able to
Exactly.
coordinate. Yeah. Which is what you're supposed to do when you're, investigating evidence.
And of course, there was lots of evidence found at the house. They found the torture boards, the rope used, plastic sheeting, the handcuffs, dildos, lime to put over the bodies, and thin glass tubes. I'm not sure what those were for. They just found tubes. Maybe they were nothing. I don't know. But they also found a portable radio that had been rigged to play louder than it was built to play, which is probably how the neighbors didn't hear torture was happening, because they were hearing music.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I can think of as to why they didn't hear anything. But
Pure insanity.
it is. And, after everything's said and done, this was easily and is still considered one of the worst serial killings in U.S. history.
You can hear
You
and
can
see
yeah,
why.
The sheer numbers will tell you that it was definitely horrible. And then you add in their ages and it just amplifies the horror of it
Right.
and how awful it is. So, yeah, in a 3-year time span, he wreaked havoc on the Houston area. He was in Pasadena when everything ended.
He was in Pasadena,
Yes.
Texas.
Yes.
Okay. Well, so there's Pasadena, California, which is the more widely known. So that's
Fair enough.
an important distinction.
It is a bit of an important distinction.
So he's in Pasadena, Texas, when this all went down.
Yes.
And was this at his house or hotel? Or at a hotel? Was this house?
This
or an
was a
apartment?
house.
This was a house. Okay.
It's not really clear. I couldn't find any clear if he owned the house or if he was renting the house. But, the other thing that confuses me is, where did he get all this money from? Their family business went under. I mean, I can't imagine the family having tons of money, that Corll could just be thrown away. Now, granted, it's not like he was paying them $200 a week. It was $200 every couple months. Right. But sometimes they bring him two.
Very likely that when he filed for bankruptcy, all the machinery and things like that he sold.
Well, I don't know if they filed for bankruptcy. I think
I would assume that if it failed, they filed for bankruptcy, and he sold all the machinery and things like that to help pay, and probably just kept the money from that. But there's a reason his parents owned. It was a candy factory.
Candy factory, yeah.
So that's
across the street from a school was where it was last located at.
So that is your implication there for the Candyman
in Houston Heights, which at the time was a low income area.
Which easy enough to lure children.
Oh yeah, very easy.
But there you go. And this is, we made the reference earlier to don't get into the van with strangers with candy.
Yeah.
Don't make that joke. But there is kind of this thing where we see it as the younger kids should be careful of that. And these are teenagers. And they're teenagers that are going to these strangers' houses to party and hang out with them. And
yes.
And
I don't. Of a party.
Obviously, we can't ask them. We don't know how many without actually
but...
asking Henley at this point because he's the only one left. Did they just go there? Did these teens go there one time and then they were abducted? Did they go there multiple times and pass out, and that's why there was no suspicion? You know what I mean? Like when they would go there and they would, I'm going to go hang out with my friend. A lot of times
it was, I'm going to go hang out with my friend. And I don't know, my mom, when growing up, it was, well, what friend are you going to go hang out with? Where are you going to be at? Mm-hmm. She wanted details, so that way if something did happen to one of us, my sister or I,
right,
she would know where to look.
My mom was the same way.
Yeah.
Like we'll go out of town.
Well, maybe this is why.
I'm sure it is. But we'll drive out of town. Like I might take a trip and go out of town or something like that. And Mom's like, "Well, what hotel are you gonna be? Where are you gonna be?"
As adults.
I'm like, "Ma." I mean, but it's still a good practice to have. But it's still a good practice to have.
It is,
because if you do go missing,
somebody's got to be able to find you.
Somebody's got to be able to. Well, not only that, but somebody's got to be able to tell somebody. He was at this hotel. I had talked to him at this time. But it is, and it's true though. This was the 70s, and the helicopter parenting that you see now, which I actually agree is a very paranoid form of parenting. I don't think it's healthy because think about it. We had 28 young men between the ages of 13 and 19. 13 and 20. Yeah. So 8 years of age. So you had 13, 14, 8 years of total age, right? And 28 victims in that specific age range. Out of how many millions of kids?
Well, 42 or 43 went missing at that time in that area.
So we'll say 43 out of how many millions of kids across the country? And
I don't know what the population was back then.
A lot. I'm pretty sure it was like 250 million or something like that. I know it was still a lot. I know in the last 40 years it's grown, or in the last 30 years it's grown over 100 million. So it's actually probably closer to 200 million. But so even just from a statistical standpoint, it is highly, highly, highly unlikely that your child is going to be that victim. But the thing about it is, someone's child, in order for that statistic to exist, someone's child has to be the victim.
Yeah.
So that is why you have the paranoia of, I'm not going to let it be my kid. And so they helicopter parent things like that. But in the 70s, I mean, they had a couple serial killers. They had
Well, you
Zodiac had
trusted
passed
your
at
neighbors.
this point. Yeah, and that's
You
it.
were far more trusting back then.
And that's
You
it.
were far more trusting back then. There were still people that lived with their doors unlocked in the city. There were still, there wasn't cell phones.
Right.
There wasn't the internet. There wasn't GPS tracking.
Also, kids were a lot more obedient and respectful back then. I'm
They were.
sorry, I'm not trying to be, that guy that says this whole generation is
because
full
the
of
parents were more strict,
buttholes, but
and so of course
there's a lot more yes ma'am, no ma'am
yes.
type children back in
Yes.
that day. And, but it's the 70s, like we said, and
Yeah.
this is the generation that, thought steel lawn darts were a cool kid's toy. So
And the metal playgrounds.
right in the metal playgrounds, like with the
where you
with
burn
this,
yourself going down
right,
them.
where you literally peel off 3 layers of skin going down the slide.
Yeah, don't go down those slides in the summer.
And you're like, I'll check this out. And and then they would like the giant hole in the slide that was,
Yeah,
it
but
was
no one-
rusted through, and
like
you
you said,
slide
though-
into it, cut yourself.
No one wants that statistic, that kid, to
Right.
be their kid.
Correct.
They don't want to be part of that statistic. And I feel like it's probably, I don't have children myself, but if I did, I would want to make sure that I did everything I possibly could through their entire life to make sure that they were as safe as possible, because I would never forgive myself if I allowed something
That's
to
true.
happen. Even if I thought I allowed something to happen, because a lot of times it's not the parents' fault,
It's true. But this is something that I
but
will
they're going to
say.
blame themselves.
Even if you did everything perfect and something happened to that kid, you're still going to blame yourself.
Oh yeah.
The guilt will always be present no matter what you do. I'm a parent. Believe me, I know. The guilt
I know.
will always be there. And what's kind of funny about it, I was thinking, man, what really was the difference? Because I'm sure the parents are like, hey, where are you going? Where are you going to be? Stuff like that. But also in the 70s, you didn't have this I'm Sue happy culture. Where
This is
in the
true.
70s, if you touched my kid inappropriately or did something crazy,
You might get a threat and a
no,
beating.
you might. There's a whole group of dads that are going to show up at your door and stomp your brains in, and that's the whole thing. Like, oh, you killed my kid. My kid went missing from your house.
Yeah.
And I do not support mob justice in any form or format, but there
But
was
they would
that
take a little more
threat.
policing,
And
so to speak, in their
everybody
hands
had that threat, that
Yeah.
constant threat. The dads, and they will stomp your brains in
to protect their
to
family.
protect their families. And like I said, I don't agree with mob rule, but that was partly why things like that
The
were
threat
unheard
of
of.
mob rule
the
was- yeah.
threat of mob rule, the threat of there we go. The threat of mob justice in the neighborhood justice, if you will, kept people honest. Because even if they
Or at
were
least more honest.
monsters, at least more honest, right? So even if people were monsters, they would maybe not do it in their own neighborhoods because
They'd hide it.
they'd hide it better. But I don't know. And like nowadays, they're just like, they'll just walk out of their apartment, shoot somebody in the head, walk back in there, and nobody cares. Like nowadays, nobody gives a crap. Let's walk up, shoot a kid in the face, and they'll just, nobody cares. But they don't. Unless it's sensational, they don't care.
Oh, you mean like media-wise?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's literally what I'm
I
getting
thought you
at.
meant like people in general. I was
No,
like, what?
Even most police, even most police agencies are like, oh, that sucks. He got murdered. We'll add it to our stack.
Yeah.
It's weird.
And there's some, yeah.
It's crazy. Like there are probably serial killers that are running around right now at this very moment, maybe in your neighborhood. That
Let's hope not.
I do hope not. But there are serial killers that are probably running around right now getting away with it because nobody
Well,
keeps
at
up
this
on
point,
stuff like they used
there's
to.
been, I feel like there's been enough of them that they've learned mistakes from.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, they evolve. Criminals evolve. All kinds of criminals evolve.
Criminality evolves
In general, yeah.
Yeah.
It has to. Otherwise, it would stop completely and you wouldn't get away
Right.
with any of it. So if you don't evolve, you're caught and you're done.
Yeah, usually as policing and technology evolves, as so does criminality.
Yes.
They're two competing technologies, which is the weirdest thing. But
Yeah.
they actually, one ferments better policing, and then the better policing creates better criminals. Like not
Yeah.
better criminals, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I know what you mean.
it's nuts. Like their weird symbiotic relationship. It's like Batman and the Joker. It's weird. Can't just kill crime though. Batman could just kill Joker. He refuses. But anyways, that's a different show. Go ahead.
Well, we may or may not cover the Night Stalker, but I mean, that's partly why the Night Stalker got away with it. He was random.
Yep.
He completely random on what he did. So on who his targets were, on how he did things, he was completely random, and he was all over the place. He wasn't in one town. He was hopping, and so he got away with.
If we do, I think that'll be like a later show, because it's been done to death. Night Stalker's been done to death. There's several of them.
Yeah.
Like even Zodiac. I love Zodiac, but I knew about him 25 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, when I was a teenager when I learned about that, and I was like, oh man, this is so cool. Like I didn't really fully grasp it because I was a kid, but
I knew about the Candyman, but I only thought Candyman was the guy that poisoned the candy, because that's the one that you grow up hearing
Well, there's
about.
also the no, he wasn't. Like there's this whole mythos, if you say the Candyman's name 3 times in the mirror, like he appears and he's got a hook for a hand, and he used to be
there's all kinds of crazy
stuff.
stuff.
Like the urban legends surrounding that are exceptionally
I don't know where
nuts.
they got them from. I really don't.
The word of mouth. It's just this crazy word of mouth thing.
Well, the telephone game, as we all know,
well,
is a messy game of where you start out saying telephone and you end up saying cheese.
That's what the internet is now. The internet's just a fancy telephone game, because you read something, you forget what you actually read, so you ad-lib it to your friend, who then ad-libs it to another friend. It's terrible.
It's just more widespread telephone game.
20 and so
more people
now
are
instead
hearing
of
your version
there
of
you
telephone.
go, and instead of one person hearing the thing incorrectly,
branches.
Yep.
Like a family tree.
Yep. Like a
horrible family tree.
Yeah, it's insane. So,
but
man, that's like I didn't know. I knew there was a lot of detail involving the Candyman. I didn't realize.
I mean,
it was that significant though.
Like I said, there's at least 25 victims. So
28.
Or, I'm sorry, yes, 28. Thank you.
No, it's okay. I was
Not
just making sure that I heard it right.
From,
Like, wait, 28?
No, it's 20. It was 28.
Over 25 victims. I mean, let's.
It was a minimum of 28 though, and I forget where I was going with that.
I'm thinking he had another accomplice.
You think he had a third?
Yeah.
That neither one of those two knew
He
about?
was willing to kill Henley. And Brooks
he was pissed at Henley, though.
It doesn't matter, but he was willing because
he still had Brooks. Brooks just wasn't there that night. Brooks was back being active at this point and bringing him victims. So Brooks wasn't completely absent at this time. He was just absent on that day.
I just have a hard time feeling like he was content with Henley. Like I don't know. There's some weirdness going on. Was it Brooks that testified that Henley was the sadistic and abusive one?
Yes.
So Henley
he said he was particularly or especially sadistic, I think was his wording.
Okay.
But Henley doesn't deny. He owns up to what he did.
I don't know, just the way he behaved that night versus everything you heard about him, and you're like,
yeah, you got to wonder what
was actually true, or if Brooks was really the one that was the sadistic,
circuit fired off properly to get him to do the right thing.
Was Brooks maybe the sadistic and abusive one? And he was trying to push it off on Henley, and Henley, knowing that he just watched it happen and go down, like maybe he was that hooked. Maybe he was that.
I feel like, well, then why would Henley confess to so much, and maybe not throw Brooks under the bus? Because
Brooks never
he threw
confessed
Brooks'
to the murder.
name in. Well, no, he didn't. He confessed to being.
Maybe he was scared of Brooks.
I mean, he could have been, but at this point, you're going into jail, and they're probably not going to put you together. So,
but they might.
Well, in the 70s, they might have.
Yeah,
but
that's what I'm saying. Like, it's a real possibility that they could have been cellmates.
So, I mean, there's that possibility there, but Henley never said Brooks partook in any of the murders, and Brooks never confessed to being part of any of the actual murdering. He admits to.
We should go find out where Henley's in jail. We should go talk to him.
I mean, he has recently done an interview.
Did he?
Not recent, but I want to say, I forget what year it was. I remember reading about it, but I forget what year it was. But someone did fairly recently get granted an interview with him.
All right.
So, I mean, I assume he's probably somewhere in Texas, but who knows? Because you're
Yeah.
serving that long. I know they move prisoners around. So, He could be in California for all we know.
Well, if he's in a PC cell, then he's probably just stuck in a PC cell. And unless he was in danger, they wouldn't move him. Protective custody cell, they just stuck him in a cell by himself. Probably usually you get one other roommate, yeah. Unless you're in isolation.
Well, you worked in a prison for a period, so I mean, you knew that there was a whole separate section for those that were in there for a life
custody.
sentence and for
yeah, that's the supermax. That's different, but
Okay.
yeah, there are high value interests that will get placed in protective custody cells, and they're usually placed there with other members of protected custody. But then you have isolation cells where they're kept away from general pop, and they have their own yard, they have their own lunch schedule, they get their own separate food.
do they get to mow their own lawn?
No, they say they typically, yeah, they don't typically.
We said they
get
got their
out
own
of the cell
yard.
very
I mean,
much, yeah. But they get their own yard time, shower time, all that stuff, and usually
separate,
it's
they
like
don't have
one.
to-
Yeah, it's like one at a time. They're allowed in the shower like one at a time. Like they don't get.
well,
a
I
lot
mean,
of
you
group
can't
time.
isolate if there's more than one in there. So,
And you can't put cameras in there because it's a violation.
can you have officers in there though? I mean, I would assume
Sort
an officer
of.
can be in there.
Sort of. You don't want to be. I mean,
Fair enough.
You don't
Enough
want
said.
to be, and it's not anything that you're thinking. It's not like that at all. It's you don't want to be because it's a bunch of grown men showering, and not only that, the way that I know this is kind of turned into a quick breakdown of prison stuff, and I don't want it to be that, but just very quickly, the way that prisoners. There's an entire political spectrum in prison. And there's an entire system of order in prison that prisoners utilize. There's a whole ecosystem.
Yeah.
Guards are a part of that ecosystem, but their job is to tend to control and nurture that ecosystem and kind of curb it into the direction that makes it both palatable, pleasing, comfortable, and still punishing at the same time, because it is still punishment. Like
But
you're
not
not
luxury.
supposed to, right? You're not supposed to be a luxury prison like Club Med. However, there are certain guards that stand out because they try to, and not inappropriately, but they try to keep the ecosystem from getting out of control.
Yeah.
And if you're standing in the showers where there are no cameras, but the camera watched you walk in there,
Okay, I get what you're saying.
then the prisoners can make claims against you to have
That
you
can't be
removed.
proven.
That can't be proven
Yeah.
or disproven
And it's
necessarily.
word versus, his version.
Right.
Your
And
word.
then a victim of a sexual assault can then claim that they were assaulted, go to the nurse, prove that they were assaulted, and then blame you. And then you were in the shower, and now it's a terrible place
yeah.
to be.
No.
So
So
as a guard, you want to
you wanna be on the
consistently
camera.
remain on camera
yeah,
at all
that
times.
makes sense. So, well, thank you for that.
No, it's fine. It's
It makes sense.
and believe me that the amount of false reports that come out of prisons,
Oh yeah, I remember you telling me
there's
about that.
thousands of them.
Yeah.
Almost every single
I
guard.
mean, well, they're bored.
and
I would assume.
they're bored and they don't like certain guards.
Yeah.
And we had this joke that if you don't have paperwork on you at the prison, you're not doing your job.
Like you don't have false reports
Right.
filed
If you
against
don't, yeah. If you haven't had a report filed against you, then you are not doing your job.
You're doing something wrong.
Because if you're doing your job, inevitably you're going to rock one of their boats. You're going to make them mad. And that's literally the only thing they have to do.
To get
All they
back.
have there is time.
Yeah.
And believe me when I say, like, oh, no way to waste their time doing that. Yes, they would. I've watched them sit in their cell and fill out hundreds of reports
Just cause.
just because, writing their lawyer, writing their family. That's all they do all day long. So, yeah, prison's a weird place. And I'm hoping that Henley maybe got bopped a few times. Not like, like bopped in his head because he's a piece of crap.
Yeah, taking. Well,
Sorry.
mean,
Sorry, I have no mercy.
yeah.
If I was the guard, I would
Well,
make sure that he was safe because that was
he
my
was a
job.
kid
But
at
it's not
the
my job
time.
anymore, so I hope he
Yeah.
got bopped.
Well, he was a kid at the time, but that only excuses so much.
Yeah,
So I mean, there is a limit to that excusing, and I think he went way past it. So he most definitely, by the time he went into prison, I mean, he wasn't kept in like juvenile or anything like that, because at this point he was, I mean, in Texas
Right.
for a while at least, it's been 17 is his age. So he was very likely put in with adult population right away.
Right. So there you go. That's the Candyman.
Yep, that's
Candyman.
That's the Candyman and his candy
followers, I guess. I don't know. His candy corns.
Now you ruined candy corn.
No,
That's already
absolutely
ruined.
not.
That's what their
We're done.
producer
You know what?
said.
That's how the
It's
show
already
ends. Bye,
ruined.
everybody.
We are going to close it off here, though. So thank you, everyone, for watching, for joining in. Super appreciate your support. Be sure to like the video, to subscribe to our channel, so that way you can get all the content. And we do have a membership on our website. It's only $5 a month, geekpublicradio.com. And you'll get to be able to watch live streamings of the recordings. You'll be able to get early access to things. There's movies and all kinds of really cool stuff in the member section. So it's definitely worth it, especially at only $5 a month. And it helps make sure that we can keep bringing you this, kind of fun. And I mean, well, tonight wasn't necessarily fun, but this kind of content and
Yeah, tonight was disturbing for real.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, it
but
really
it needed to
was.
be, because this is a disturbing tale. This is
Exactly.
We're scouring the dregs. That's what we're
Exactly.
doing.
So definitely, take a look at the website, where you can catch our reviews and all that. All of that's free on the website. And of course, you can watch our videos and whatnot on YouTube, but we have so much more in the member section on the
Yes.
website. So just so much more. But yeah, definitely go check that out. Definitely make sure that you like the video, that you subscribe to the channels, and make sure you hit the little bell so you get notified whenever we do have new audiobooks, new show recordings, whatever we have coming out. Now, if you have any suggestions for the show, please be sure to, down in the comments, leave any suggestions that you might have, and we'll definitely take a look into them and see if maybe that's something that might be fun to do for the show, or interesting to do for the show is probably more accurate. But seriously, thanks, Crazy Chris, for joining me tonight.
Hey, an
Super
absolute
appreciate
pleasure.
your commentary with me. It's definitely, it's always fun to bounce ideas off of you, and we always have great conversations.
Hey, shout out to Glasgow. Thank you for tuning in, Glasgow. Appreciate it.
Oh, for the last one?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. That was who made the suggestion. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. We did get that suggestion. I haven't looked into it yet, but it will be looked into, I promise. So thank you again for tuning in, everyone. Super appreciate your time. Definitely appreciate your support. And yeah, thanks for tuning to Geek Public Radio. This is Jassel, bringing in your criminal fix.